Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpattykake Mashima. Today, it's judgment time, baby. Today we are going over all of the books that I read this year and the video games that I played, and we will be dropping them into one of 4 categories. Those categories will be explained here in a minute. It has been a bit of a controversial year, surprisingly more controversial than last year when I read around 20 ALA books, surprisingly. So you know what? The uniform here today also goes with what our bottom level category will be in line with the biggest controversy of the year. Stay tuned for that. However, before we get started, number 1, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more, especially if you want to see more books burned. Number 2, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number 1 way to be featured is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creative genius. At this point, we are at the showdown, the last couple of days before the end of the year cringe stream, where you guys interpret the idea of cringe and write your best cringy fic. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit that first chapter and the cover to the Fresh Meat feature, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. I may be your reader. I might be odd. Let me rephrase that. I am odd, but I might be AW odd and pick up the rest of your book to read for myself. However, I'm not the only audience out there. In fact, we would all be pretty doomed if I was the only audience out there. So hopefully somebody else would also see your work, think I need more of that in my life, and then just it right up. With that said, let's jump into this with the tier list of the year. Judgment time is around the corner. By around the corner, I mean it is literally here. Now, for our 4 categories, we have keep, which is that I enjoyed it. I would like to keep it with me. I will remember it, putting it on the bookshelf. The second is donate, which means it doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't like it or I didn't enjoy it for what it was. You can also fall into donate if I believe that I would rather donate the book to like a library or to just give to somebody, to give somebody else that experience. I think it would be better served as somebody else also getting to experience. Many of the books that I put in keep will be stuff that I would recommend to other people as well. Donate is something that I don't want to keep as a resource. I'm not a very materialistic person, so I like to keep my bookcases minimized. Just specific content. The third one is workshop, and that is a book that I believe would be better served if it went back to critique group, got workshopped, got clarified, and then it was released again, because there is value in it, but I think that it could be much sharper. And then burn means that you have offended the very soul of my being. I'm throwing you in the fire because as we have come across the controversies on this channel this year, book burning is one of them that we just have to get behind. We've been accused of it so many times now. I will admit, I have thrown books in the recycle bin on more than one occasion so that they are destroyed, so that nobody will wander upon those cursed pieces of old tree, sliced thin with ink on them. Sometimes you just don't want to hex people like that. As usual, I will give a brief description of these books as we go through them, and most of them have long-form reviews on this channel if you're interested in them. A couple of them do not. But with that said, let's start doing this. These are not in any particular order. They're just in whatever order that this website decided it wanted to put them in when I uploaded the images. So we're just going to go through them that way instead of the order of operations in which I read them, because they're not in that order. The first book up is Amygdala by Sam Fenna, and that is a book about a creature named Lucy Lacemaker, who is a youngling of whatever kind of creatures they are in this world before the Big Bang, and she gets wrapped up in this political turmoil of the Lockets, who are these might is right sort of society makers, against the Methusa, which are the let's have a society that protects the weak. And Lucy is on the side of the might makes right. She gets pulled into this by somebody that she knows, an old flame, an old friend of hers named Goldune at the very beginning of it, who is carrying around this magic. Actually, I guess it's more scientific. It's medicine that actually explodes when it is encounters a specific sort of trigger. She has to flee because of some of the things in her hometown that create difficulty. She eventually gets a job at a newspaper and she just kind of gets swept into all this. There's not really a forward motion because there's so many characters. There's not really a focus in this book because there are so many characters and there's so much going on at the same time. So many different focal points. I would have put Amygdala in Workshop because I think it has interesting ideas. It has a creative world. The author is clearly very passionate about it. But after interacting with the author and the way that they treat it, I would not want any random person to run across this book to possibly end up being mistreated by the author by simply stating their opinion. So that book goes in burn. The next book is The Spook's Apprentice. I may not remember all of the names of the authors in these, so I should just say the titles of them. The Spook's Apprentice was a book that we read on Loinstream that you guys all selected for us to read. It is a middle grade magic, I should say fantasy adventure about a young boy who comes of age and is set out to go and start making his own way in the world, where he becomes this spook's apprentice. He meets a couple of witches and has to train to become the spook's apprentice, and eventually has to stop the evil that is happening around the spook. It has a strong push forward for the action. It has interesting descriptions for the spookiness, and it has strong family connections between the characters. I would put that in donate because I am above the age in which I would like bond with it, but I think that it is a great book for middle graders that would very much enjoy it. Diary of an Oxygen Thief is a book about a guy who just, I think he was Irish. He just hates everything. He's a business dude. Oh, yeah, he just complains about everything. He sleeps with a bunch of people. I don't know. There's not much to say about it. It's just a whiny monologue the whole time from a self-entitled oxygen thief. So, burn it. Tampa. That is a book about a teacher from the perspective of a teacher. She's 30-something, and she is sexually obsessed with 12 to 14-year-old students whom she teaches. She gets into a sexual relationship with one of them after, fantasizing for most of the book about them. And then after she dumps that guy, she gets into another relationship with another one at the end of the book. She does go to court where she is pretty much let off because she is a woman having sex, and they're like, what little boy doesn't want to have sex? It is overly descriptive in the sexual department, and it gets to burn because it is so over the top. I'm not saying that you can't write these things. I think Alyssa Nutting did not do a great job with presenting that topic. If you're trying to reach people about this idea of little boys being sexually preyed upon by older women, then it's better to not disgust them with this level of sexualization in this book. The second thing is, if you go and look at libraries that have this book, it is constantly checked out and there are lots of copies, and it's kind of sus. I'm just going to put it out there. It's sus. The next book is The Dark Violinist, and it is a book about a young man whose father is actually dead. And he is something, I would call him something of a violin prodigy, and maybe it has to do with the evil death spirits. But somebody that he works with sends a video of him playing the violin into this prestigious music school where he gets into it because the conductor there actually was among this group of people, is a very competitive dude, and wants to beat his rival conductors and sees this power in this kid. Now, this kid, obviously, with his power coming from the devil, is well, that's where the dark comes from for this. And things do not go well, as they tend not to when you involve the devil in your wish fulfillment. I would put that in donate. I think that it would benefit from a little bit of workshopping, mostly to get the lines crisper, because if you watch the review of that, I think that some of the lines ended up being, some of the style of the writing tended to be repetitive and redundant, and it could have been written with more sharpness, but it was interesting, and I actually have The Dark Creator and The Dark Scientist already loaded on my Kindle and have been waiting to read them. Hopefully I will read The Dark Scientist in January, and I will also try to read The Dark Creator in January, but then I have some other books that I'm so looking forward to reading as well in the new year, because we're going to pick some stuff. The next book is Adolf in Wonderland. And Adolf in Wonderland is an absurdist, I can't say satire, it's just absurdism, really bizarro, really, about this guy named Adolf, as you might imagine, who ends up in this place that is completely just bizarre and weird. And he is trying to get back and find his missing buddy who disappeared once they landed in this weird place. There really isn't too much forward momentum in that because they kind of just go place to place, and he does marry a woman in there. It just felt like a waste of time. I burn it. I had been like aware of Carlton Mellick III for a long time, and I had read one of his copies of short stories before, and I found that valuable to read. But when I was reading Adolf in Wonderland, it just felt like a waste of time, and it was just trying to be like shocking and lol random. And so I didn't, I'm The next book is Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls. And that was a book about a guy, and I think his sister lived with him, that they discovered living puppets in their walls. And they went into these walls and discovered that their house was built on top of the old puppet studio for the studio of the show, kind of like Sesame Street, that used to play when they were kids. And these puppets were possessed and they were eating people. Yeah, it goes in burn because it has a generative AI cover, and I can't be sure that the interior isn't generative AI. The next book is Incel, which is about a guy who can't seem to get laid, getting obsessed that he needs to get laid before he turns 23 or else he is going to kill himself. So he sets out in his new chosen field of biological psychology, behavioral psychology, something like that. It was a biological science, trying to computer science human behavior to try to figure out how to control women. It is a satire on that type of person. I would put it in donate because I think that it is worthy for a lot of people to read to get that kind of personal perspective. I think that book ended the best way that it possibly could. And I also think that the ending kind of goes over some people's heads. It is not praising that lifestyle. It is saying if you live like this, you're going to be miserable. And it even shows that through the way that the character has his arc at the end. And the next book was Avalon Timefall, and that is a story about two people from current era who magically get transported back in time to the era of the Salem witch trials. One of them is named Michael, the other one is Julie, and Michael is the they're both super geniuses, but Michael is the super genius that literally builds his man cave in the 1600s, and Julie just goes to witch trials and then gets rescued by Michael, and Michael has a huge crush on Julie because she was on television at some point as well, and he already knew her, though she didn't know him. And that story I would put in workshop because I think that it needed more time before it hit the market. I think that it needed some of the power fantasy pulled back and some of the relationship between Julie and Michael. And I think Julie's marriage needed to be completely removed because the fact that she gets married at the very beginning, only for her husband to be completely ignored, only for Julie to make up in a dream that she can cheat on her husband now because she is sure, as she tells herself in her dream through her husband's mouth, that her husband has moved on when he is likely in current era still looking for her. That does not make it okay for her to cheat on her husband for me. The book doesn't say that it's cheating. I say it's cheating, and it was just so unnecessary when she could have just been single and not had that issue come up at all. The next book is Sold, which was a story told in verse. It was for the ALA's banned books list that was released this year by the American Library Association. And that is about a girl who lives in an Indian country, and she is trafficked and pushed into brothel work. She is turned into a prostitute with many other little girls. I think she's like 13, maybe 14. And then at the end, she is rescued by some Americans who are trying to break up the human trafficking ring. I think the author had said that it was a huge passion project for her because she was personally involved with humanitarian efforts and knew people involved in some of these programs that went overseas. I don't know anything about them, but I think that's what drew the author to this. The author is also a journalist who has studied in that area. I didn't think that it was the best book. I didn't like how it was written. And then it also had like a Deus Ex Machina all the way at the end to just fix things with the Americans just flying in. I would put it in donate though, because it was not really offensive, but I don't think that it necessarily, I don't know, the workshop, I don't necessarily think that it would benefit from being workshopped either. Teleshop USA was a book that was sent to my P.O. box by somebody who saw the channel or watches the channel, and it is about a television host. Well, it's about a television station that's a sales station, like Shop Network, and the drama that goes on there between all of the different people, whether it's the president or the the different personalities or the new guy that's coming in. And I absolutely hated this book because one of the main characters was an older man who was in his 40s or his 50s who had cheated on his wife for the entirety of their marriage and then got mad at his wife for being mad at him for cheating on him. And everybody just gave him high fives about how he was so awesome. And it was clear that his wife was a bitch. So it goes into the freaking fireplace. I don't know who would think that it was a great idea to send that to me when it is just arrogant. It is plotless. The guy gets rewarded for everything in the end. The only benefit to that, and oh my gosh, and it's crude. And the only benefit to that book is that the freaking serial cheater asshole man dies of like syphilis in the end. The next book is Something So Lovely by Salem Lynn, and it is a book about kind of a non-regular angel girl. I mean, she lives in heaven. She's not really an angel, but she lives among angels, and they all kind of pretend that she's an angel. She's actually the new head of purgatory, though she doesn't know it quite yet. They've been hiding it from her, and by they, I mean like Lucifer and Michael, and God's not involved, okay? God is gone. God is missing in all of this. And she is also the reincarnation of one of the previous leaders of Purgatory. After the current leader of Purgatory finds her in heaven during an annual heaven party, and this guy's name is Manny, this starts the countdown of trying to hide her, trying to train her, trying to make her strong enough to take on Manny, to take over Purgatory when she was not told about anything whatsoever. I think this book goes in workshop because it needed more work to bring out the character, the motivation, the tension of the scenes built into it than it had. But it wasn't offensive enough that I would drop it in a burn. And now we're on to Clownfish TV, a comic, which was a fan comic that is now carried by the Clownfish TV store. It was sent to me by the author or the creator of the comic, and it just takes videos from Clownfish TV and turns it into comics. It is clearly a project of love and passion from the creator to these creators, but I have to put it in burn because the more I've learned about Clownfish TV, the less I can stand them, and just how much they despise animators and the artist industry and artist individuals. I can't do anything with them. And that's going to go for Crimson Rin as well, because it is Clownfish TV's original middle grade book. And I'll describe it really quick here, but it drops in burn because like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't donate with how spiteful I've found those people to be. Maybe I have the wrong impression, as I'm not very... I don't watch their content, but from what I've seen of them, and when I see their stuff pop up, they are constantly hoping for the failure of animators, for the fail of artists, and using generative AI. They don't respect artists from what I've seen, and so I don't have any support for them, period, not even in their creative endeavors. So what Crimson Rin is about is a young boy who is going on a treasure hunt because his parents, I think his parents were dead. Sorry, I'm trying to remember these on the fly. And his adoptive family owes money, and he wants to help his adoptive family be able to stay where they want to stay, where they live. And so he goes out to find this missing hidden treasure that should be able to give them everything that they need. It is a very middle grade. The next book was Immortal Rising, and all I remember from it, really, I don't remember a whole lot. It was a very short book that had magic. It had switching perspectives. There's a long form review on here to remember it if you really want to know the details on it. I just remember the people going out into the woods for a hunt and then getting attacked, and almost everybody died on that, especially the main girl died. And then there was like a perspective switch into a villainess who didn't really matter. And I would put this in workshop because what I do remember of it is that it didn't have focus for motivation. It didn't have focus for selling me the story, and the scene switches were very awkward. The next novel is Teen Death. I don't remember the whole rest of the story. It had something to do with new religion, desecration. and something or another. I picked this up because this was a book from the Fresh Meat feature, and I personally actually do like fiction that has a religious storyline to it. That was St. Gregory was one of my favorite books that I read last year. It was an indie book that I picked up from the Fresh Meat feature, and it starred a priest that had gone to the New World in the 1800s to look for his missing friend in this small town in Wisconsin, and discovered some creature features going on there. So I picked up Teen Death because I read the first chapter for the Fresh Meat feature and I was interested. But that story is about a young boy who is from a family line of priests in this small town. And when the time comes for him to basically come after his dad to lead the church, some of the deacons in the church challenge him because Teen Death has never actually been in the position that he needs to be in, that he was expected to be in order to train. And so they decide to send Teen Death off to school to learn how to be the leadership, the spiritual leadership that he needs to be. And while he is gone, this deacon inserts his son into that position and turns the town corrupt, and then he comes back and has to clean it up, and slowly he descends into this, was it slowly or was it pretty quickly, into this control by this demon. There was a weird combination of elements in that, between him like taking out the sex pestery that was happening in the church, but then also then using the church to sacrifice the girl who had feelings for him for his school lover. I would put that in workshop. I didn't feel like it had fully realized its ideas. It was so full of interesting ideas, but I don't think that it quite made it to where it needed to be a really enjoyable, compelling read for me. The next story is Ghost of the Badlands, which is the comic book that came out by Razor Fist this year, drawn by George Alexopoulos. As you know, if you've been around the channel very much, I love George Alexopoulos' art style, especially when he does comics. It is very expressive, especially when it is colored. Oh, I love the way that he does color work. However, I am not a fan of Razor Fist's writing. Ghost of the Badlands is about this. It's the best way to describe Ghost in the Badlands is a Bible man in a Western setting, because the ghost kind of out there doing vengeance, kind of out there speaking in a verse, kind of out there leading the main non-Bible man character, Saul, into his redemption arc from being a bandit. I don't think the writing was as good as it could have been. I don't think it had enough character focus. It didn't tell you if it was trying to be Ghost's story or Saul's story. And with the idea that Ghost in the Badlands is like one in a longer series of trying to bring the characters together, trying to bring the main set of characters together who are all going to work under the ghost, I don't think it focused enough on Saul to then let him be the reason that he changed who he was. It was just him going places where he was told because he was told, and if he didn't, then he would be killed by the ghost who was giving him another chance. So I think that goes into workshop, because I think that could be a compelling story, but I don't think it quite made it there. The next story that was one that I randomly came across on YouTube because I saw a video on my homepage from somebody that I don't even watch that had named it like, they were praising it. They just said that it was a great book that was about the modern millennial male. It's just a whiny movie maker guy that can't get over his ex-girlfriend. I swear, it felt like a waste of time. It goes and burn. I did not like the way that it was written at all. The next book is Yaira from the Rippaverse, and Yaira is a superhero comic where she is a scientist by day and an ice princess from another, I don't think she's a princess, but an ice and superpowered lady Viking from another planet. And the story beats didn't really make any sense going through it. So many stories, and this is one of the reasons why I do the long form summaries like I do, to kind of express, if you're not going to read the books, to kind of help get an idea of how the story beats look and what the story is doing from the beginning to end and why it doesn't really build, or to give at least my expressions of why I didn't feel like it built to justify itself. And Yaira just didn't build. It kept having like random scenes that didn't mean really anything. And then you would get to like, oh, here she is at the old folks home talking to this old lady randomly. We don't know what their relationship is, but that lady now exists just to give some exposition. And now there's suddenly this giant mountain that looks like Iceland in the middle of Texas. What are we doing here? I think that it could have been compelling. I don't think it made it there because it needed workshopping. But that's how I felt about pretty much all of the Rippaverse comics. Is I don't think that they've had dedicated people who are good writers who are also willing to put more time into making the stories not terrible. I think a lot of people are treating it like it's or have been. I haven't read any of the new ones. I don't care to read any of the new ones. But at the point of stopping at Yaira, I don't feel like anybody had any investment in making those good comics. They were jobs. And that's how it felt after reading 4 of them. The next book is Cursed Sixth Virgil, which is a book by one of you guys. And you sent it in to me and asked if I would read it. So I did. And it is a book about a young man. Well, it starts with a curse from Haiti, where this guy summons a demon in order to get revenge on the humanity that stole his wife and child from him. And he just wanted to kill all of it. And that turned into him injecting 6 different women with this curse that they were going to then give birth to these cursed children that once they were all born and all of age and all had these powers, then they would come together and then it would help to summon this demon from hell that would then take over the earthly realm. And I think that book had a lot of potential. It had a lot of interesting ideas, and it had a lot of passion, especially behind the violent moments. But I think that it needed to be workshopped a bit more before it came to the marketplace. The next book is Blankets. It is a graphic novel memoir from a young man talking about his first love when he was a junior slash senior in high school, and he is completely selfish. I'm burning that garbage. Oh my gosh. I'm burning that garbage the same way that he burned everything that belonged to his girlfriend because she was busy with her family falling apart, and he felt so lonely that she couldn't be there for him while her parents were fighting each other and she was losing her family and she had to take care of her little brothers on her own. And he was just like, fine, screw you. I don't care about you. After they had sex for the first time, like, he got what he wanted, and then he just like, oh, fine. You don't have time to be with me anytime that I want. It's over, and I'm not giving you an explanation, and I'm hanging up on you and burning everything. You bring me back. The next book is Allegiance by Ben Shapiro. It is a political thriller that kind of puts together all of the generic ideas that are just talking points. Generic action man Brett fighting against generic bad guys that want to terrorize America with a bomb on a plane at the very end with the president. Yeah, how did a bomb on a vest guy get through into Air Force One? I don't know. It gets burned. We've also got like the whole race war plot going on. I don't freaking know what's going I don't. The next book is Not Drunk Enough. Volumes 1 and 2 are both in here. When I find the second one, I'll drop it in the same place as the first one because they're so short. And you should read them together because it just continues the same thing. And this is about a guy named Logan who is a cleanup guy who is brought into this laboratory to do some cleanup work late at night with his buddy, and it turns out that this place is taken over by some mutated scientists from some things that went wrong when one of the lead scientists tried to bring his son back from the dead, and Logan gets infected also with these problem plants. And I love the artwork of Not Drunk Enough. I liked the story. I actually really liked the characters in Not Drunk Enough. I wish there was more because it kind of left on an open ending, but I don't think the author is going to draw more, unfortunately. The next thing on the list is actually a video game, and it is Judgment. It is Judgment in the Yakuza series, where you play as Yagami. You're reminded of this case that you did years ago, which is why you quit being a lawyer. Because you got this guy off that everybody said was definitely a murderer. He definitely did it. And then 2 or 3 years later, he was found to have murdered his girlfriend and burned the house down after you got him free. So then Yagami blamed himself and then quit being a lawyer and then became a PI. And then this kind of comes back up to you again when you're brought back to where he worked, where his girlfriend worked, which is at a medical lab in Japan, and it heavily revolves around this plot that has to do with a cure for Alzheimer's and how the medical industry is working with some under the table things and doing human testing without clearance to do human testing. And yeah, we enjoyed that quite a bit. The next story is Polaris Rising, which is a romance. It's like a Regency romance in sci-fi clothing, where this woman was told that she was going to was given an arranged marriage with this other house on her planet, but she didn't want to marry that guy, so she ran away. And when we find her, she has been captured by some bounty hunters that are going to take her back to her planet so that she can make it right with her dad and marry this guy. But she also runs into one of the galaxy's most wanted with a very, very high price on his head, and they work out a deal to run away together. They bond and they are thirsty, and she eventually decides that she needs to go back to her dad to talk over the situation because the other house is threatening war if he doesn't get the land that her family has, because they are building some military items for their spaceships with the mines from those lands. Burn it. It was just a waste of time. It was. Just don't sell Regency romances calling them sci-fi, okay? The next book is the graphic novel version of Anne Frank's diary. I'm putting it in burn, okay? If that's not obvious. It changed things. I had to go and also get a copy of Anne Frank's original diary to test some things against what was in the diary versus what was in this book, and things were changed. I didn't check everything against what was in the diary versus what was in the book, but when you run into enough situations where it's changed the dialogue, where it's changed the way that Anne acted, where it's changing the characterizations and descriptions of the characters, it just feels dishonest. And so that felt like a dishonest book to me because it did not match what was in the actual memoir totally. It matched some things. I'm not trying to say that there is nothing in there that matches, but it matches enough that then if you read the graphic novel, you will assume that it is accurate when it is not. The next book is Forever by Judy Blume. That book was a book that was banned in Utah from a list of 13 books that were removed for graphic descriptions of sex. And it is about a teenage girl's first experience with sex and getting on the pill, and the dude names his dick Ralph, and it goes into burn because it was not an enjoyable experience. There are better ways to educate people than creating books that are lies to get information past parents. If you're trying to trick parents into buying things for their kids so they don't know that they're buying sexual things for kids, my sus radar is on. The next book is Transforming Trauma, and it was a book recommended by one of you guys, and it has to do with the psychological studies of children who experienced child sexual abuse, as well as the study of some predators, what it looks like, and how to combat some of the cases of what predatory behavior on children looks like. And I thought it was a very helpful book. It is an older book, so some of the stats might need to be re-looked at if anybody did a research on it more recently. However, I thought that the information was very interesting, very helpful, and very well put together. And some of the commentary in general was very thoughtful and interesting. The next story is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This is a book that we are currently reading and going to be finishing tomorrow on the Loin stream. And it is about this guy named Aidan Bishop who wakes up in the middle of the forest without remembering who he is, where he is, what he is doing, and the only thing he does remember is the name Anna. He also hears something around him. He gets attacked when he's in the woods, and this starts off what will be the next 8 days of his life, where he will be playing out the same party scene on the Hardcastle's estate, leading up to Evelyn Hardcastle's murder at the end of the night party. And he is told that he has to solve who murders her in order to get out of this time loop where he is switching from person to person. And as he is in these different perspectives, he remembers the previous perspectives, and he can also feel the personalities and influences of the bodies he is wearing. It has been very fun, very interesting. I think it's very snappy, and I have been enjoying it a lot. I look forward to reading more of this author next year. The next book that I am currently reading is a book about Native American folklore and legends, and it's just a big collection of a bunch of stories from different tribes, and I'm going to put that in keep because it is interesting to just read about mythology and folklore. You're always just going to get kind of a condensed version when it's written like this, sort of like the Grimm fairy tales are also just, clipped, but it's very interesting to see the folklore and legend that different people believe in and carry with them and share. The next book is My Dark Vanessa, which was one of my favorite books that I read this year. That is a story that takes place in two different timelines, one when the character is 15 and another when she is 30. it starts out with her in 30 and then goes back in time and then switches back and forth between these two timelines. One where she is getting into a relationship and starting a relationship and hiding a relationship with her teacher. And the other is when she is an adult and she's dealing with the aftermath of actually coming to terms with what happened. If she even comes to terms with it at all, that's up for you. So that goes into I'm keeping it. Another book that I just recently finished was Willful Creatures by Amy Bender, and it is a collection of bizarre short stories. I don't want to call it bizarro. It says magical realism. It borderlines bizarre. You've got stuff like a guy goes into a pet shop and purchases a much smaller man to be his pet. There's a woman that is a potato that gives birth to an iron head. There is a really mean-spirited girl that goes to a party and she wants to kiss a redhead, a black-haired guy, and a blonde guy before the night is over. And she hides everybody's jackets because she wants to like do a crime, and stealing people's wallets isn't original enough. I would put that in donate because I think it's an interesting experience. But after the first couple of stories, I was like, okay, I think I'm over this. It's why I don't think I can do Bizarro long form. I can read some Bizarre short form, but like if it goes on too long, I'm like, okay, this is dumb. The next book is Queen of the Ghouls, which is a book that I just finished here on the channel. And that is a book about a young man named Eldred who lives in this village that is kind of on this, what is called a world seal. And there are witches that live in the forest that are trying to, or a coven of witches, I should say, that are trying to break that world seal to bring back the elder gods. Because what the seal does is it keeps the elder gods away from humanity and stops humanity from being demolished by the bloody desire of some of the gods. And I would put that in workshop because I saw a lot of potential in it, but I don't quite think it was ready, especially with how inactive the main character was in that book with his own storyline, that when it came to him being the one to finish things in the end, he didn't even have the ability to say, I'm going to go and do that. He had to have his dad tell him to go and finish things. The next story is The Inugami Curse, which was another book that we voted on and read for the Loin Stream. And it's a story about a Japanese family that lives on a mansion. And this detective is called into town after this bizarre death happens on the family, on the Inugami estate. And as this detective starts spending time with the family, he starts unraveling the weird family secrets, the weird family relationships, and exactly what led and is leading to this murder of all of these different Inugami curse sons, because one by one, the three sons are dying. And obviously there is an estate on the line for this. So they're trying to figure out who done it. I would put that in donate because I think it's an interesting story. I think some of the imagery was really great, but I do think that the writing suffered from it might have suffered from the translation. It might have suffered from the style. There was just a lot of repetition in it that I think could have been removed to make it clipper. The next story is Let's Talk About It. It was a nonfiction comic about sex, teaching sex to children, and telling people that they are bad if they feel jealous about their partner sleeping with other people. Also talking to children about different sex toys with some graphic imagery. Burn it. There are certain things that you do and do not need to show children, and I'm sorry. Not sorry. Not sorry. The next book is Trick by Ellen Hopkins. I read one of Ellen Hopkins' books, Crank, last year. And this book was actually about like 5-6 different teenagers who all ended up being away from home, being in sexual relationships, and ended up becoming prostitutes in different ways. I know one of them ended up having sex with her boyfriend who was not a Christian. And so then her dad was like, you have to go to Christian camp for troublesome teens because you're having sex outside of marriage. And then she just gets raped by some guy there who has brain damage and is having mommy issues and is like sucking on her titty and telling her and like acting like she is his mom while she cradles him after they have sex. And you have a younger guy who gets groomed by some much older man after going into a bar, and it's a miserable book. I'm burning it. The thing with the ALA books is, and that's what made last year so freaking terrible, is that the ALA books are almost entirely misery. They're not complete misery. Sherman Alexi's book, actually decent, actually worth the experience, but so many of these ALA books, they just exist to be traumatizing and terrible. There's nothing fun about them. They just try to hurt you. The next book is The Moonlight by Razorfist. That was a loin read that we did together. It was about a thief who got involved, got kind of pulled into the business of some bigwig in his town and was trying to get out and couldn't. And then he falls for some girl and then she dies and then he wants to seek revenge. It needed workshopping. It was kind of hard to follow. The character motivations were just not there. And it suffered from a lot of the same issues that Ghost of the Badlands suffered from. And there were also some parallels, like similar scenes exactly between the Ghost of the Badlands and the Moonlight. The next book is a nonfiction called The Woman They Could Not Silence, and that is a book about a woman named Elizabeth Packard who lived in the 1800s and was institutionalized for disagreeing with her husband. She was from Illinois. Yes, that's all that she was institutionalized for, because at the time you didn't need any reasons or proof in order to institutionalize your wife. She would just be taken away. And one thing in the letters in that book also said that if she had an emotional response of any kind to what was happening to her, that would be proof that she is insane. So she had to be taken away stone-faced. And it goes over her time being in the institution, what she had to do to survive in the institution, her writing books, her fighting for the right for married women to actually have rights and have a voice inside of marriage so that their husbands couldn't just put them in an institution when they felt like it. And it also goes with her trying to get her children back, because even once she got her freedom from the institution, her husband ran to Massachusetts where new laws had not been placed yet, because it's a federation. You have to do stuff on an individual basis. And so then if she went to Massachusetts, she'd just be institutionalized again because they didn't have the same laws. I thought it was a great book. She is a great person, very inspirational, and she was so smart. The next book is The Gift of Fear by Gavin. I don't remember what his last name was. That was a book that talks about the psychology of your intuition and your fear response. And it is by a former FBI agent. And I think the author of that book needed a little bit more love in his life, a little bit more positive things in his life, because all that I really remember about it right now, and I briefly talked about it on this channel when I read it. What I remember the most, though, is that he just used a bunch of bad examples about life and then was like, this is proof that everything sucks and you need to be suspicious of everyone. You see that person asking if they can take your cart into the store for you? Don't trust them. They're going to kidnap you and murder you. That's what they always do. And it's just like, there were some interesting things, and I think it's worth reading in order to get the perspective of somebody like that. But I also think that it got a lot of things that were just ridiculously wrong. But it is opinions, so it's whatever. The next book is Necrotown, and that was a book that we read on the Loin stream as well. It is a story about a private detective with a kitsune wife, and he owes the trolls a lot of money. He owes the trolls so much money that he makes a deal with some bigwig in town to do a job, and then blows them. No, he doesn't blow the money. He gets kicked by the trolls. Then they take his money, and then he can't pay off his debt because he's just carrying around the money to go to the freaking alcohol store. And then he has to follow through to go and find what he's actually hired to do. He tries not to because he doesn't really want to do his job because he hates the guy that hired him. But the guy wants him to find his lost daughter. And eventually the detective finds the lost daughter in Necrotown, and she has been taken over by bad people. And he is very incompetent. The setting in that book is not very well defined. It kind of just throws things around. It's a sort of mystical version of New York, but not New York. It goes, hey, look, it's like the bureaus of New York, but it's not the bureaus of New York. And this also isn't actually New York. I think it needed more workshopping. The characters were kind of lame. The connections between things were kind of lame. The character where we were constantly asking what the main character was doing when he actually had a job to do. Oh my gosh. And the character also just had this. He was semi-immortal. And by that, I mean, anytime he died, he would then be reborn in the place where he was originally born. He would just like go through time and space and then be reborn starting as the fertilized seed and then just like speed run into a fetus and then a fully formed adult on the floor in the cabin of his birth. The next book was Luke, Overworked and Underpaid. That was a comic that was about some guys' team that they go around and they fight monsters, remove monsters. and Sal, the main character, does not have their life together. trying to get their relationship back on track, and they are also pretty tired of their job, as dangerous as it is. I love the art style in that book so much. I just wish the ending was not as bitter and melancholy as it is, but I enjoyed the art style, and I would have enjoyed more in this series and more with those characters if, it didn't end the way that it did. The next book is A Song at the End of the World by Jason Furman, and he is a YouTuber who does a lot of work like Chuck Palahniuk, and he does writing sprints, and that is a story about two young girls who live basically in the end of the world, crazy time, where there are creature features around places, there are crazy people around places, gangs roaming around, and one of them, the older of the two girls, goes out to go and look for their mother after she hasn't come back. The older girl gets captured by this gang and then has to escape the gang and then has to try to get back to her sister from wherever she is. And that is not what is going to happen. I would put that in workshop because I think the author has a strong character voice, especially when he's using the sound effects to build the story. And I also think he did really well with creating such a casualness around the insanity of the other characters. It was just hard to follow and sometimes felt like it didn't get it fully on the page what the reader needed to be looking at, maybe because it was an early book. The next book is Fourth Wing, which everybody should know at this point, by Rebecca Yarros, and it is a story about a girl with paper skin and glass bones who gets forced into going to military school with dragons to get drafted for war. Even though she reads books, we're burning it, and we're burning Iron Flame, which is the second book in that same series. The war, whatever, is picking up. I don't really care. I felt like a worse person reading both of them just because I was giving it attention, and by letting it live in my head, I was a worse person for it. The next book is Cuckoo by Gretchen Felker Martin, which is a book about a couple of queer teenagers who get sent off to stop being queer camp. Theoretically, they say it's a Jesus camp, but they never say Jesus at the camp. And it's a knockoff of It. It says that it was inspired by Stephen King's It, but it just very poorly rips it off. It's much more like The Stepford Wives, where they're replacing the people with aliens and cuckoos and whatnot than with Stephen King's It. The only thing that has anything to do with Stephen King's It is it rips off an orgy scene or it creates it. The only thing that it has in common with Stephen King's It is a monster, the teenagers that then come back together to destroy the monster as adults, and then an orgy scene between the teenagers. It gets burned. It was such a piece of crap book. See the full review on the channel here. Camp Damascus is another book that was theoretically about a conversion therapy camp for teenagers / young adults. The main character is like 20 when the main character is like 20, and it follows this girl named Rose as she slowly awakens to remembering what her life was like before she was sent to Camp Damascus, and then her and her new friends, her new friend, an ex-guidance counselor, and then her ex-girlfriend, who she now remembers, go to burn the Camp Damascus down and free everybody from their gay urge demons. That gets burned as well. The story was unfocused. The characters were unfocused. It felt spiteful. I don't like spite writing. The next story is A Court of Sugar and Spice, which was a Nutcracker retelling, but porny. The girls, Elena and Luisa, end up meeting the Nutcracker, get taken to Feyland, where they fall in love with where they fall in lust with the Sugar Plum Prince and the Nutcracker King guy, and the one of them gets abducted by the Rat King and gets pulled into an orgy where she's just having sex with the Sugar Plum Prince forever and ever so that nobody else can have sex with her until they get rescued. Burn it. We need to Lysol the house. Maybe have to burn the entire house down. There is so much nasty just left in everything. I'm sorry. It is what it is. The next story is Spirit of Order Fragments, which is an indie book. We read that for the first book of the Loin Stream this year, and it is a story about a group of teenagers or young adults, I think they're teenagers, who get pulled together into this alternate world, this parallel world to Earth, and are brought to save it. And there's this dark force that affects the alternate world, that if it happens, it'll also affect the real world. And they're just brought into this order of spirits in order to become the new guardians of that vault. And I would put that into donate because I think it is a strong book for young adults. It's a strong action fantasy for young adults. And the author is really nice. And the cast is made up of a diverse group of people with different personalities, and they ultimately do have to work together. The next book is The Bringer of Light. And it was a book. Oh no. I remember Vernon and Wells inspired it, and it had to do with like testing the point of humanity in a way. There were multiple timelines going on where the author was switching what characters were being featured to try to show. That book really didn't stick with me. I remember the tech bros and I remember the test tube babies all the way at the end of the book when they were on the island. But I don't remember much more than that. It was a work. It was a work of passion, and the author obviously put a lot of work into it. I would put that in donate because I think it was just very specifically not something that I would enjoy. But I think that it was a well-crafted book. The next book is Sweet Tooth, the first comic, because there are many, many comics. There's also a Netflix show. And Sweet Tooth is about this deer hybrid guy and living in this hybrid world. And his dad dies, and he needs to find a way to survive. And these hunters come along, and then he goes away with the hunter, and the one, and he goes away with this one hunter who saves him from the other hunters. But then the one hunter takes him to a facility where he sells him off to them. And I would donate that. I wasn't super pulled in. I didn't really care about it. The next story is Hello Kitty Must Die, which is about a middle-aged Asian woman with these pressures from her parents to get married, and they set her up on dates. She is also very obsessed to just break her hymen and lose her virginity, but she realizes that she was born without a hymen, or she doesn't have a hymen when she tried to get rid of her virginity, and so she wants to get enough money to get her hymen put back in place so then she can break her own hymen. And this turns into her starting to date this guy who is not only the hymen doctor, but is also somebody she used to go to school with, and he is also a serial killer. And that was a book that was actually recommended by a cohort back in grad school. And I don't remember why I was like, let's look at this again. I could not remember anything about it. And then I started reading it and I was like, oh, why is grad school like this? The next on the list is No More Heroes 3, another game that we played during the night. And it is about Travis entering an alien tournament as the aliens come to Earth to take over Earth. And he fights them off as the assassin that he is. Loved it. Loved it. Also loved that Charles was the voice of Fu. Fu is so good, guys. Oh my gosh. He deserved better than what his dad did. The next story is Forbidden, which is a brother-sister romance I read for one of you, Toasty, at the beginning of the year. And it's a brother and sister who their mother is absent, their dad is gone, and they both take care of their younger siblings together, get into a romance, determine that that society is against them, that it is a civil rights issue, and one of them dies tragically. Maya is such a manipulator. Burn this book, especially since it is being given to like 11-year-olds and left in 11-year-old libraries. Oh. To then make arguments about how incest should be covered, like interracial marriage. The next story is We Need to Talk About Kevin. That is a book about a mother going through her life as a mother to try to figure out what it is she did wrong that turned her son into a school killer, because the whole book is started when her son goes to prison for having massacred like 8 people at school. Loved that book. It was told in the form of letters. I can't recommend it enough. The characterization in that book is so incredible. And if you're looking for a piscatory book, that is it. It is masterclass in what Lionel Shriver does. The next thing on the list is Resident Evil 4, the remake. That was also played recently. Keeping it. I loved that game. I'm not going to describe what it is because it's Resident Evil. Zombie hunting, Spain. That's what it is. BioShock, keeping it. That is in an underwater society. Oh my gosh. Never trust the Irish. That is what we're learning this year, because the bad guy... Spoilers. The bad guy in that game is Irish. Freaking Irish in Red Dead Redemption as well. Also love it. Yuppie Psycho. We'll put it in keeping it because also interesting imagery. Also, we just skipped through Red Dead and BioShock. BioShock has underwater atmosphere and biochemistry advancements, and Red Dead Redemption is a Western. And then you've got Horizon Zero Dawn, which I loved. Also sci-fi. It's got this mixture of you're in the future, where society has ended multiple times over now and restarted itself because of a sentient AI that kind of wiped out everybody. But they set up backup plans just in case. Then we got Yakuza 4, and that one you get 4 different perspectives in it, which one is Kiryu, another is Akiyama, another is Tanimura, and another is Saejima, which is Majima's blood brother. And I got some stuff going down with the police. Oh, and Saejima was put on death row unjustly. I think somebody was trying to destroy the Tojo clan again. I think the worst thing about that was the Saejima got the freaking plot armor treatment where it's like, oh, he doesn't have to die for his sins because we actually just made it so he didn't actually murder all of those people. Ignore the fact that his intention was to kill all those people. The person who hired him just gave him rubber bullets. So he didn't murder them, so he doesn't have to suffer and die for redemption like most characters in these stories. And then the last game that we've got going on is Lost to Judgment, where Yagami is tracking down information about why a police officer whose son killed himself is connected to a murder of the bully who was the person who bullied the police officer's son. So that also goes and keeps. So this is what our thing looks like. So this is what our this is what our year looks like. Better than last year. I mean, there are not like 5 or 6 different categories for hellish this year. So that says something. Again, like I said, most of these have a long form video on them. If you want to know more about any of them, check out the book review playlist at the end of this video. With all that said, let me know, have you read any of these books? Will you read any of these books? What were some of your favorite books that you read this year? So maybe I can go look at them. With that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?